Alright, hello Astrobro subscribers, and welcome back to another video of the Exalted and Debilitated Planet series. Today we are going to be discussing Jupiter, which is exalted in the sign of Cancer, and debilitated in the sign of Capricorn, which is the opposite of where Mars's exaltation and debilitation points are. Before I get into the specifics of this planet and what it does in these signs, I am going to give a brief refresher of what exaltation and debilitation is, and basically it is the place where the planet is the most comfortable, where it fits the best into society, where it is its highest self. This does not necessarily mean that exaltation and debilitation are good or bad. It just means that it's more of a comfort zone thing. Where is this planet's comfort zone? Where is it its highest self? This being said, and also understanding the nature of exaltations and debilitations is important, because the nature of exaltations and debilitations gives you a key insight into understanding the planet, which is a subpersonality. Astrology is a series of correspondences between planetary bodies in the sky and subpersonalities in the mind, and understanding the exaltations and debilitation points of certain planets gives you some key insights into these subpersonalities, which make up all of our lives, all of our stories, all of our narratives in every story, modern or historical, and every story that will be in the future, and it gives you key insight into understanding every person that ever existed or will exist, because everybody is made up of these subpersonalities. So that is what exaltations and debilitations are, and why they are useful. This being said, Jupiter is the planet we're talking about today, and Jupiter represents the morals of society, not necessarily the enforcement of those morals, that would be Saturn, but the morals, principles, the moral foundations themselves. Jupiter is the positive aspect of the rules. It is the order that exists inside of society, whereas Saturn is the enforcement of this order, which is necessary to prevent the morality decaying. The best representation of Jupiter in modern culture is, I would say, honestly, it's probably Santa Claus. This idea of the benevolent, jolly Father Christmas, Father figure, is the pure positive element of the man, society, whereas Saturn is much more in line with Scrooge from The Christmas Carol. That's the best modern day representation of Saturn in our society that is commonly known. Of course, these symbols pop up everywhere, but Jupiter and Saturn represent the positive and the negative aspect of culture, whereas, and keep in mind, positive and negative doesn't mean good and bad. It's more like positive and negative in an electrical terminal. Whereas, Mars and Venus represent the positive and negative, again, not good and bad, representation of like the human ego and your desires. So this is going up one level of analysis, one level of resolution higher, to the entire social landscape, and the sum total of the good and the sum total of the evil of that landscape is represented in astrology by Jupiter and Saturn. So when Jupiter is exalted, it is in the sign of Cancer. Now, if you remember, Mars in the sign of Cancer is aggressive, it's impulsive, but not because it is mean-spirited, but because it feels a stronger than average need for self-defense, for self-protection. Now, when Jupiter, which is a much more calm, philosophical, and benevolent planet, goes into the sign of Cancer, that same need to protect finally has the moral grounding which is required for it to thrive. So people with Jupiter in the sign of Cancer, they don't necessarily need anything to protect you, to want to create a moral space for you to exist in, and to provide care and love. They're doing it simply because it's the right thing to do. Cancer is it is a materialistic sign in that it represents the home and the foundations and security and that kind of thing, but primarily it is a spiritual sign, and it views the material things not for the sake of pleasure like Taurus does, but for the sake of its spiritual connection, its emotional connection to those things. So when you get the benevolent aspect of a society coming inside the home, the fourth house, Cancer, what you get is a person who is very, very benevolent and very loving and understands morality in an implicit fashion. Now, does this mean that you're going to have a good life? No, not necessarily, because keep in mind, having a sharp moral code also means that you have to enforce that moral code. And if you think about it like this, if you had let's say a priest, like some moral leader, like let's say Gandhi, MLK, whoever, insert the person you view as an icon of peace and love and prosperity, come into your house, like you were roommates with this person and you had to do more or less what they said. Do you think that you could party? Do you think that you could smoke and drink and like have a bunch of promiscuous sex, or do you maybe think that these people, this wise emblem of spiritual and religious love, would be ashamed of you if you were doing that? So Jupiter in Cancer sets a strong moral foundation, but it also is it sets a very high standard for people's moral lives, and it also means that they hold other people to that standard, and because of this, they can get frustrated very easily with people. They might not act on that frustration. That depends, how they act depends on how Mars is placed, but it does have a tendency to be very judgmental and harsh. Now, on the flip side, Jupiter in Capricorn, the moral element of society existing in the sign of effectively the material plane, the plane of work, reputation, money, status, ethics, as in like ethics as in cause and effect, like what you do in your life and why you do it, your purpose, that kind of thing. Capricorn represents your career. Not necessarily because of love, but because your career needs to be done. Most people don't love their jobs. Most people don't love their careers. They do it because if they don't do it, then there will be repercussions like anxiety, or they'll lose their money, or, that kind of thing. And Jupiter, the highest moral value in this, kind of puts a very intense reverence, a religious reverence for status and work. They view that, generally speaking, these people's highest moral attainment becomes the attainment of status and success. And because of that, these people can kind of get in a position where they will, sort of like Rahu, where they will, sort of, what's the word? Use any means necessary to get their career success, their money, their finances. Because Jupiter in the sign of Capricorn, it views work as the highest value. So why would it not cut people off at the knees, so to speak, to get what it wants, to achieve higher levels of success? It doesn't have any morals other than that. Their morals are defined by cause and effect, like what they can get and how much status and power they can get, what the crowd thinks. Saturn also represents the crowd and other people and society and how society views you. So their public face basically becomes their internal moral compass. And as a result, these people can be misguided. Now, it also depends on where Saturn is placed. So if you have Saturn in, a Jupiter-ruled sign, these people might become strict adherents of a religion. Like Saturn in Sagittarius with Jupiter in Capricorn, this is where you get people who are like evangelistic preachers and that kind of thing. Because Saturn is saying, okay, you have to spend a lot of time and effort building a career in a religious system, and then Jupiter says the way you achieve success is through your work. So that can be a thing. But generally speaking, people with Jupiter and Capricorn, their highest moral compass is materialism, and anything else is secondary to that. And so yeah, that was my analysis of Jupiter in the sign of Capricorn and Cancer, and being exalted in the sign of Cancer, where the loving father comes into the home, and Jupiter being debilitated in the sign of Capricorn, where your highest moral compass, the highest god in your pantheon, so to speak, your highest value is just work and the results of your labor. So yeah, next I will be doing Saturn in the sign of Libra and Aries, and tune in for that.